Mark, can you explain us a little bit what is Follow This and how did you have this wonderful idea?
Yes, I will. Before I start, really thank you for your. I'm so honored to be the fourth of this, the fifth actually, of such great example of the power of citizens. It always reminds me of this famous Margaret Mead quote: "Never doubt that a small group of committed citizens can really change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." It's very motivating to be after you guys. How Follow This started? It started when I was a journalist. I'm an engineer who became journalist after seeing an inconvenient truth of Al Gore. I thought, okay, now I know there's a big problem. I know the solution. I'm an engineer. The solutions are easy, renewable technology. So I have to do something about it. And I wrote down a lot. I became an energy and climate journalist. And these things always start with somebody thinking and writing down, wouldn't it be great if? And I wrote down many times, wouldn't it be great if Shell, Total, or a big oil company would really get it and start investing completely differently, start stopping exploring for more oil and gas and start putting all these brains and billions behind the energy transition. We need these big oil companies to do so. So I wrote this down many times, and sometimes I concluded with Shell. Shell is in my home country, the Netherlands. If you don't change, you will be the Kodak of the 21st century. You will go bankrupt. Unfortunately, that didn't help. So then I thought, okay, there must be another way. And I thought, okay, Shell will never listen to a journalist, but they have to listen to shareholders. So I started a movement of shareholders in Shell. Sounds very counterintuitive. Green shareholders in Shell who all say, we support you to make this brave decision to completely invest differently. So I went to the shareholder meeting of Shell on behalf of a few hundred people. So if you want to start something like this, it sounds like a ridiculous idea. You really have to start as a grassroots organization. So here you see me on the shareholder meeting. I didn't want to speak on my own, so we opened a website where you could buy one symbolic share in Shell. And the idea was that everybody really felt green shareholder and really felt the owner of that company. So everybody, a few hundred people in the beginning of 2015, bought for 30 euros one share in Shell, sent an email to the CEO of Shell, Ben van Beurden, saying, "Hi Ben, I'm your newest shareholder. I think you have the power to change the world. You have billions to spend. That's why I'm shareholder. You have my support to start investing differently." So I could go to the shareholder meeting, say, I'm here on behalf of a few hundred shareholders, and we support you to change. What are you waiting for? And the answer was simple. Mr. van Baal, a very sympathetic initiative, and we advise you to come back every year, and we will tell you when the time is right. Luckily enough, a year later, we had 5 million euros in Shell, and we could file a shareholder resolution, which means you can put it on the agenda and all shareholders have to vote about it. And the interesting thing is, most shareholders are pension funds and big investors who all talk about a green pension, long-term investments, stopping climate change. So we could go to big investors and tell them, okay, you want a green pension? You want your billions still around in 20, 30 years? And you also want to keep on being shareholder in Shell and big oil companies? Then you have to support us and vote for this climate resolution. So that's how we started. And in the Netherlands, slowly, shareholders started supporting this. And so in 2016, only one of the top 10 voted for. A year later, already half of them. And slowly, Dutch investors are brave enough to vote against the Shell board and saying to them, you really have to change. And that's a tough thing for an investor. They're very conservative. So normally they vote with management. But because they, in 2017, the majority of Dutch shareholders, big investors, voted for our resolution, Shell had to change. And maybe I have to tell you a little bit about the resolution.
Yes, that was my next question.
What we put on the agenda of Shell, and later on BP and Equinor, and we would love to do that with Total as well, is the simple message: shareholders support the company to commit to the Paris Climate Agreement by setting targets for all emissions, that's very important, all emissions, in line with the Paris Climate Agreement. So that sounds very logical. It's a fair ask.
What do you mean by all emissions?
Yeah, that's very important. The devil is in the detail. When we started with Shell, they said, okay, first they called our resolution unwise in the first year. Second year they said, no, it's unreasonable because you're asking us to lower all our emissions. And of course we can lower our own emissions. We can try to emit as little CO2 as possible when we extract the oil or when we refine the oil. But what our customers do with our products, that's their responsibility. And a lot of investors repeated that argument. Mark, you're asking something unreasonable. Shell does not know what our customers do with their products. Now that's when I lost my patience and said, guys, I think their customers burn it. What do you think? But that was really the key debate in the first year. You're asking something unreasonable. But luckily enough, a small group of progressive investors started supporting this. And again, these are the heroes of this story. We just put it on the agenda. And then the majority of Dutch investors were brave enough to vote for. 6% only voted for. This sounds little, but normally 99% votes with management. So this is a very strong signal to the board. So in 2017, Shell took this big step and saying, okay, now we're going to take responsibility for the emissions of our customers, our products.
Okay. And what about the resolutions?
Yeah.
Are they about renewables energies or what?
They're very agnostic, as we call them. So again, it sounds very vague. Commit yourself to Paris with emission targets. But it's a Trojan horse, and everybody understands that, especially the oil majors. That's why they're so dead against it, because they know as soon as they commit to Paris, they cannot look for more oil. That's incompatible with the Paris Climate Agreement. If you want to commit to the Paris Climate Agreement, you have to decline your business in oil and gas and increase your business in renewable energy. And that's why they're so opposing against it. So first Shell, and last year we went with the same resolution to BP and Equinor, and the response was exactly the same. Unreasonable because of the emissions of our customers are not our problem. I went to the BP shareholder meeting, and even there I literally asked the CEO, do you really think scope 3, as we call it, that's the jargon for the emissions of your customers, is not your problem? And he said, no, it's not my problem. Mm-hmm. Then again, with BP, 8% voted for our resolution. So that was also a very strong signal to the board. That's our theory of change. That you can do. There's also investors who say, no, we need the agreement with the management, and we say, no, we just ask for what's necessary. Our house is on fire. This is what is the minimum we have to do. This is what we agreed in the Paris Climate Agreement. This is what we're asking for, and as long as a small group of investors supports that, the companies will change. We can't wait for a majority. It's a little bit the same theory of change as Extinction Rebellion has. Just a few percent of people can change. Here we say just a few percent of investors can change these companies.
Okay, so you believe that 8% of investors can change the policy of these companies. And we heard some of the CEOs saying that they cannot really change if government policies do not change. And they talked about the carbon tax.
Yeah.
So
that's really a fig leaf they're holding. These companies are much more powerful than most governments. They can really do it, and it's really a fig leaf. And they always see renewables as a kind of chore. So we have to do it, but minimum. And we say, no, it's a business opportunity.
Okay. So did you get some victories?
Yeah, with Shell, Shell really made this industry-leading promise. I have to say, it's just a promise to lower their emissions. So they promised to halve their emissions by 2050. This is by far not enough to reach the Paris Climate Agreement, but at least they took responsibility for this scope 3 emissions, the emissions of their products. So that's a big step. And now we keep the pressure on Shell to really align these targets with the Paris Climate Agreement, which means basically net zero emissions by 2050, and a completely different way of investing. And we did the same with BP and Equinor. And again, there 8%, 12%. These kind of numbers will change these companies.
Okay. Could this be replicated in other countries?
Yeah, we think so. We depend on countries where the threshold for filing a resolution is relatively low. So in France, it's a challenge, but because we need 0.5%. so that's difficult.
It's 0.5? Point,
Yeah, that's 700 million. In the UK, we only needed 5 million
okay.
for Shell and BP, and in Norway, you only need just one share. But at least we like to go to the shareholder meeting of Total with the same story we went with to Shell. So on I think it's the 29th of May, Total will hold their shareholder meeting, and we want to go there the same way as we went to Shell in 2015. Here we are, we follow this. We support you to commit yourself to the Paris Climate Agreement. We're in Paris here, so if Total doesn't commit, who else will do? And we support your company. So today I can announce that we also start gathering shareholders in Total. So I really hope that my story, the most important thing of my story, I think, is that first of all, that you are convinced that activist shareholder works, and you also want to be part of this movement. Also buy a green share in Total. You can do that we have a beta version on our website where you can buy Total now. And please buy a share, and please send this email to Patrick Pouyanné, if I pronounce it right. Mr. Pouyanné, I'm your newest shareholder. You can change the world. You have the billions and the smart people to really speed up the energy transition. We can't do it without you. And that's why I'm a shareholder. So that's one thing. But most important, I think my story started with me thinking, wouldn't it be great if? And I hope a lot of people in this audience, we are here at ChangeNOW, so I suppose a lot of people think, wouldn't it be great if? I hope you all do. Fill in your own dream and think, okay, if an unknown journalist can change the course of Shell, I can also start with my own phrase, wouldn't it be great if?
Did you meet the top management of these companies?
Yeah, once in a while, of course, we meet these companies. Yeah, in Shell, we are their most influential shareholders, so they should talk to us once in a while. And of course, they're now telling us, okay, Mark, you had your success, now leave us alone for a while. So we talk to them regularly, yeah.
Okay. And do you feel that they have a will to change?
I think there's a big will in these companies to change, but when I look at the top management, when I started to follow this, once in a while I thought, these guys also must have children, they must also have debates with their children. And so in the beginning of Follow This, I sometimes dreamt of let's call it an epiphany of an oil major CEO, debate with his children, sleepless night, and then he would come to the office the next morning and say, yeah, okay, this is the right thing to do, I'm gonna change this company and I'm gonna lead the energy transition. There's a famous saying of Johan Cruijff in the Netherlands, and that's I learned from the last years, that's an utopia which will not happen. That's what Johan Cruijff always says. He always says things nobody understands. I don't think this will happen. These guys, they're all men. They have spent the last 40 years in getting oil and gas out of the ground. Very successful, otherwise they wouldn't have made it to the top job. So we can't expect from them to imagine beyond oil and gas. That responsibility is with the shareholders. And the good thing is the shareholders now one by one start understanding there is a world beyond oil and gas, and we need to get there because otherwise all our billions are in danger. So that's a good thing. The people who support the resolution of Follow This are very morally driven people in the financial system, but they can use very financial arguments. They can go to their top management and say, we have to support this resolution because our 300 billion is at risk because of climate change, because of extreme weather, droughts, refugees. The world economy will really stall or get into a downturn if we don't stop climate change. So, and we're also shareholders in this oil company, so, and these are the ones who can make or break the Paris Climate Agreement, so we have to change them. So that's my hope. I'm quite hopeful because these people who are morally driven have very financial arguments.
Okay. And what about the youth? I have the feeling that Greta and most of the youth today do not understand what you're doing right now, and they just think that we should stop extracting fossils. So how do you discuss with them?
Yeah, that's what I always say is when I started to follow this, I decided never to debate tactics. We all have the same goal, and we all have our own way of doing it. Apparently, this is the way I do it, and Extinction Rebellion basically says Shell must fall. They should, and I think that pressure is very well. I think it will take too long for these companies to go bankrupt, and I'm sure if they don't change, like in every big transition, the incumbents will be too slow, and the incumbents will go bankrupt. Kodak went bankrupt. That's the most famous example of a company who did not want to look for new business models. Only the fact that digital photography was postponed for maybe 20 years because of that, I couldn't care less. But now there's far too much at stake. So I'm absolutely sure that these companies will go bankrupt if they don't change. And that's the normal course of history. Only they will go bankrupt, and they will take the world into bankruptcy as well. So we need them to change. But having said that, all pressure on these oil majors and really showing that what they really like. I really like the Client Earth idea that they have to have a disclaimer, like on a package of cigarettes. On every advertisement, 95% of our business is still fossil fuels. So everything works, and I stumbled on this, so this is what I'm doing.
Okay. My last question is about which people can follow this. Can we join you?
Everybody can join us, everybody can help. That was really one of the most interesting things I discovered when I started following it. You really start something like this on your own, and you're surprised how fast people come to you. Okay, you're doing something great. How can I help? Can I buy a share? Can I be a volunteer? We have one guy who is now our man in Paris, who came to Amsterdam and said, I really want to help this getting kicked off in France. So people can help in all kinds of ways, but the most simple way is just buy a green share in Total and make sure we go to the next shareholder meeting on behalf of a few thousand people.
How much money do we need to do that?
A share in Total is 50 euros right now.
50?
So it's quite, but it's still yours. It's not a gift. You are an owner of Total. If after a year you say, okay, it's not going fast enough, you can sell your share again. That's part of activist shareholdership, that you basically say to the company, you really have to change, otherwise I will sell my shares. But that's basically, but that's then, it's still your own money. Only you are a green shareholder in Shell. It's difficult to explain to your friends, but you can tell them this has worked in the Netherlands, this has worked for Shell. Green shareholders in Shell has really moved Shell, and Total is lagging behind now, so we need to speed them up. So yeah, we need as many shareholders as possible and as many help as possible. Also to reach out to the pension funds and here the big institutional investors. We know for sure that Banque Postale, for example, has voted for a resolution at Equinor last year. So they're really taking the lead. And of course, we need people to expose and explain to institutional investors, banks, insurance company, that they really need to support this.
Okay. And particularly, do you need special media coverage during the next General Assembly of these companies?
Yeah, of course. I think it should be, we should make very clear that shareholders want these companies to change and that the top is reluctant. I think when you look at the young people in Total, they don't want to retire in fossil fuels. And they want to explain to their friends and family why they are working for Total. So they really want to change. But the problem, like with every big transition, is in the top layer, the people who owe their position on being successful in something of yesterday and not being able to think that there's something else.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mark. I hope you won a few shareholders today. Thank you.